exactly. It's kind of, that's it. It's done. Uh, Postnup leaves a little interpretation, a little wiggle room for the courts to interpret and to try and decipher. Depending again on each state, is how
And
much
timing,
pushback you'll get, the timing and everything that goes along with it.
right?
So
I guess there's a difference if you do this postnuptial right after the honeymoon versus 5 years down the line. That might be a little bit harder to push.
right, and if it's like, wait, you signed your postnup a month ago and now you're getting divorced, it could seem a little bit. The timing
Right.
there could leave some questions unanswered. So same idea, but not as straightforward, and it could be a little less uh, a sure deal. So what we're talking about here is the marital property. So it's property acquired during the course of marriage or before marriage if there's no prenup. Now, all this is going to vary by states, and I'll go over the different states here in a second. But we're talking home, investment, properties, cars, boats, furniture, art,
Assets.
just assets, things worth money. Retirement accounts are also included. Even something like an IRA. If income that was earned during the marriage was contributed to them, can be considered marital property. Now, there's two main groups of states when it comes to marital property and how it is defined or how it is considered when a marriage is dissolves. You might have heard of them. There's common law, which is the first one we'll go over. This is most states. Basically, property acquired by one individual of the couple is owned by that person, unless the title and deed is in both people's name, like a home. You
Right.
both apply for a mortgage. Now you're both on the deed. That's a 50-50 thing. If you co-sign on a car or on a loan or anything like that, then that becomes under common law. It's a contract you're both entering into. But this allows in these states for people to go out and get their own assets, and doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be considered all of a sudden a joint asset. Again, it depends on which state you live in.
Right.
The community property states, and I found an interesting spread of the states. Sometimes you can kind of tell a rhyme or reason. I wasn't able to, except for they're all kind of connected, except for Wisconsin up there on their own. But Arizona, California, Idaho, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, and Washington State, and then Wisconsin out there on their own are the community property states.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is not a party line type of thing.
It's not so much like many other topics where it's along certain party lines and you can kind of tell, like, I can just
blue
guess
or red
which way.
state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not this one. I found that interesting. You have some of the bluest and some of the most red states all in there. So the assets acquired during a marriage are considered community properties, earnings. This also includes debt. So there's the negative and the positive that goes along with it. If the debt was acquired before the marriage, that still remains in most cases separate property, as will if it was like certain inheritance, the way that if someone were to inherit some sum of money. So if you live in one of these states, it works different than the rest of them. We're California, so we're definitely a community property state. So it just changes the way that the law is, and that's why you really want to just kind of take a step back if you're looking into this and see what your state and what your region looks like to make sure that you make the right decisions for you. So now we've covered what are the benefits, what are the which state you might need it more in some states than you do in others, because of the laws. The community property, that that changes it. It makes it different than if you were in a common.
It's considered a true partnership in community property states. It
Right.
doesn't matter if there's just one person bringing in the income,
Right.
that's considered a partnership through and through. So it does not matter. So that's why going in, you know that that's the case. So what you're really with the prenup and even the postnup is you're trying to protect what you brought into it. And that can be
Right.
beneficial to both parties, by the way.
Yeah. And so like if I go out and buy a car, all of a sudden that car becomes not just my property, but also Sarah's property, because I bought it while we were married. I hope to not have to go buy another car. At least not now. Cars are expensive. But you know, so but it goes again both ways, because we see it also with debt. We see it also where if one person's accumulating a bunch of debt during the marriage and that marriage is to dissolve, that could make it so that the other person's on the hook for some of that debt as well.
Yeah, and we have actually run into that quite a bit, where one of the, I guess you could call it financial infidelity, which we have talked about many times. But if somebody is acquiring debt and the other is not aware of it, it's still and you're married, it's still very tough to prove that wasn't both of yours. So it can be dicey.
Yeah. So how do you ask for one? Let's say you are engaged, thinking about getting engaged. You know, how do you even start? Now you could follow Kanye's advice and just, you know, holler, we want prenup, but that's probably not the best way to do it. You want to sit down and have an honest conversation. Yes, that's 2 in a row that I've quoted a hip hop song in the Swim Lives. And you want to have a conversation. And it should be something that maybe has been conversated on before the will you marry me? Yes, I will. Let's take a picture. You know, this is something where we emphasize this a lot. You don't want to wait until here's a ring, but also here's this, why don't you look this prenup over and yeah, let's do this. Or halfway through the planning the wedding, oh yeah, by the way, I set us an appointment to go talk to an attorney so we can hash out this prenup. You got to ease your way into it. You're right. That would not be the way to do it. And the key there, you know, you'll hear it a lot from us. Communication, having that open line of communication with your significant other when it comes to finances, obviously for everything. I think communication is of the utmost importance, not just for money, but
everything.
So having that communication with that person you hope to spend the rest of your life with, you know, and hope that's, no one goes into a marriage thinking, I can't wait for the divorce.
No, well, and that's the conversation that we have talked to many people about, that you have to have that money conversation. You have to know what type of money habits you have. Can the same money habits that you have, are they going to go hand in hand with the money habits that your future spouse has? And if not, can you deal with that and understand they are who they are? And they're not automatically just going to miraculously change for you. And so that the prenup really should not be a surprise by the time it's handed down. These are conversations that need to happen when you're, I mean, it's a conversation I had to have with that Carrie and I had well in advance of when, you know, after we were engaged, but it was a discussion of how do we want to bring our kids up? How do we want to introduce different things in our children's life? And that goes for religion and it goes for everything else. So communication on all of it. There was no surprise to Carrie when we had to talk about families, both of our sides, our family's financial situations and what needs to be protected and what doesn't. And unfortunately, we would all love to believe that it's all going to end up a Disney movie and we're all going to live happily ever after. But circumstances happen in life. And unfortunately, and it seems like this percentage stays the same every year, but 50% of marriages end in divorce.
I actually read a stat that it's decreased slightly. I wonder if that correlates with
finances
with people just not getting married as much.
And that, well, that's a fact too. Yeah.
People are a little unsure. They just say, well, we just won't get married. Therefore, there's no divorce.
Yeah, and you better
never
look
got
into
married.
what kind of state you're in, because if you're together over a certain amount of time, you might be
You might
married
be
in the
on the hook
state's
for it
eyes.
anyways, right? Or at
That's
least your
right.
assets will. So
And
communication is
liabilities.
key. So you honesty goes a long way. You can have that conversation. You can say, look, this is why I feel like we need it. This is why I need one. And this is where you can, say, look, my family has this, my children have this, and so on and so forth. So honesty can go a long way when it comes time to ask or have the conversation about prenups. And it should be a win-win.
That's right.
This doesn't have to be a one person take all type scenario. It should not be a one person kind of forcing their financial needs on the other. This should be a win-win. It should be a conversation that to be had over a long course of time. And then when you talk to the professional, both of them sit down, both people sit down, have that conversation, and ask and give and take, and have it, try and find a win-win so that both people, you don't want this to kind of sour the upcoming nuptials, where someone goes into the marriage thinking, man, I got already messed up with this situation. You want it to that both people understand and have a feel like,
And at the same
okay,
time,
I
you
got
don't want to
this.
avoid the conversation because you're afraid to rough the waters, so to speak. It's
Right.
because it can come back to get
Right.
it. It's something that it sometimes just life's difficult, and difficult conversations need to be had.
Absolutely. And then you decided you want a prenup, need a prenup, want to have that conversation with your significant other. Find the right pro to help. No, being a lawyer does, maybe you don't hire Nick Miller from New Girl to be your lawyer, but you this is a legal process. There's people who, specialize in this. You want to make sure that if you do a prenup, it is done right.
It's ironclad.
It's ironclad. It fits with your states and local regulations, and honestly, not something you want to download a template off Google or Microsoft or Apple and try and fill out yourself.
This is not something you want to be cheap on.
No, it's a big deal. That's the reason you're doing it, is
Right.
because it's important to you. Find the right pro, talk to a couple different lawyers, law firms, and find the one that both parties are comfortable with, and have that conversation with them and have them help you put it together and make sure it's done right. So if that's a conversation, maybe you just sit and talk, and they can better explain, this is how it works, this is how it would work if you do not have one. This is how it works in this state, as opposed to what you might have read online or whatever it might be.
Right.
So any questions?
Do you know many people, Phil, that have had to go through this process?
No. Well,
I've
I don't know, because
had
it's
many.
not something you have that, I don't know that it's that conversation. Like, I don't know if my buddies did or didn't, because I never talked
That's
to
none
them
of our
about
business, I
prenups.
guess. That's true.
Right.
That's kind of a personal thing.
So like maybe my buddies did, and I never asked, and they never said. So maybe, but not that I know of. So
Yeah, it's a difficult conversation to have, and it's really not just sitting around the campfire banter. It's not a
right.
cocktail party. Hey, did you get the prenup before you got married?
Playing
Yeah, that's a little
cornhole.
uncomfortable and a little bit private. I get that. It tends to be that you get that information from people that are going through second marriages, third marriages,
Yes.
whatever it might be, that have children and assets and are getting married kind of later in life, where they've already acquired.
Or as people are getting a divorce.
Right.
Where you find out after the fact, where they're thankful or
Yes.
wishful that they had or didn't
Hopefully
have.
things are amicable.
Right.
Probably.
I think that's when you learn about it more, when people are getting a divorce, or like you mentioned, are onto a later marriage or oops. So you can continue learning. We have our podcast, Talk Wealth to Me. Find it wherever you find your other favorite podcasts. Obviously, we're your favorite. And you can download it, listen to it, leave us a message. If we haven't covered a topic you want covered, or if we covered one and you thought our take was not a good one, I want to hear that too. And then join us, as always, Wednesday, 2 Wednesdays from now. We're talking inflation and your finances. Hot topic. We did a podcast episode on inflation, and it's been very popular.
Yeah.
We're all feeling it. Everyone who's pumped gas anytime in the last few months can tell you inflation is a real thing. And you know, that's just the start of it at the gas pump. So I try to
not
teach
going away anytime soon.
I tried to teach my 8-year-old and 3-year-old about shrinkflation yesterday. I don't know why. I opened up a pack of cookies. They seemed a little smaller. But my 8-year-old was sitting there shaking his head the whole time, but he learned it. So inflation and your finances. Join us. Tell your friends. Same place you registered for this one, Eventbrite, right there on the QR code. Thank you, everybody. And that's it.
Thanks, everybody. See you in a couple weeks.